Hello, YouTube young fans. Welcome to the first annual making of VSN. The man behind the masterpiece. How
self-titled.
How VSN got started is a very fascinating story. It all began in 1978 when the Fred Rogers Company introduced its first ever book, The World According to Mr. Rogers. It was important to Fred Rogers to enjoy the magic, the beauty, and the wonder of his family. To start off our behind-the-scenes story, I like to introduce you to Arthur R. Donaldson, who developed the project. Arthur?
Hello there. How are you doing today, Victor?
Yeah, and tell the
hello
young
there,
audience.
young audience. How are you doing? So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we conceived of the Victor Sprinkles Neighborhood Project. Now, obviously we took a lot of inspiration from Fred Rogers' classic and timeless work in television and with communities around the United States.
Particularly in Pittsburgh.
And so when we thought about developing a new show in the same vein, we wanted to make sure that we upheld all those moral values that Fred Rogers stood for. And so it was a lot. I've read that frickin' book like 200 times, trying to get as familiar as I can with the world as Fred Rogers saw it.
In the late 1960s to the early 1700s, Wendy H. Stewart will talk to you about her 1961 demo of It's a Beautiful Day in This Neighborhood on the piano. Miss Wendy?
Thanks, Vic. Well, I started playing the piano when I was maybe in 2nd or 3rd grade. And I especially liked writing my own pieces, so when I knew that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was starting, I thought I had the best, composition piece to pair with that show, and I worked really hard on it. I sent in my audition tape, and they accepted, so that jingle,
history.
Wow.
I didn't know you wrote that.
By early of the 1940s to the late 1957, Bruce Kevin Williams the third made up the story developments throughout the 1960s. And here is Mr. Bruce K. Williams III to talk about the storyboards throughout the 1980s. Bruce?
Well, Victor, I am so honored to be here and to be part of this behind-the-scenes video. Coming up with the theme for VSN was really almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you embody everything about Fred Rogers. You look like him, you talk like him, you sing like him, and when Fred passed, it was very sad, but knowing that you were there to carry on was what gave us all so much inspiration.
Wendy?
Wendy.
Wendy.
During the process of animation, voice casting needs to be completed. From the late 1990s, Victor, which was me for the show, had to do hundreds of casting calls and songs around the world. Here to talk about a few of their roles, starting with Camille Catherine Stiltner, who had the opportunity to play two roles, Ashley Newman and Miss Pamela Travers. Camille, talk to the audience about your two characters.
Thanks, Vic. So, I'm pretty camera shy, so at first it was hard getting into these roles. But the roles I've played different musicians, piano players, 'cause that's my background. I've done some camera work on the show. Yes, Ashley, I played a student in a math class. She had been in the same math class for like 13 years.
Yeah, Patricia Ashford.
Best student in the class
Play the
by
man.
the end of it.
Play the man.
You know, always challenging roles, but always
Man.
always fresh and always fun, you know.
Fresh man.
Now,
Challenging.
it's time for James to talk to you about his three characters, Mr. McFeely, Jeff Gable, and Joe Negri. James, tell the audience about your three characters.
I remember I was hunting elk off a very remote island off of Washington State, and it was crisp in the morning. The dew was still covering the grass. The ocean was lovely. And I remember I had this one giant elk in my sights. And I'm looking down the barrel, and I see out of the corner of my eye, I see a fox. And I notice that fox, the same dew fresh on its kisses, watching this elk.
And would you please talk to the audience about your three characters? Joe Negri.
That's all I have to say about it.
Now it's time for Colin to talk finally about his two characters. Patrick Lewis and Kenny Logan.
Well, you know, I was lucky enough to get into the Victor Sprinkles neighborhood on the ground floor, and it's been a huge jumping off point for my career. I mean, look at me now. I'm basically the most powerful voice in mainstream media.
And, well, television neighbors, we are out of time, so in 20 or so years, we will do another behind the scenes documentary. Thank you, and good.